The alien queen's voice echoed through the grand, crystalline chamber, her tone a mix of disbelief and disapproval. Her iridescent scales shimmered under the soft glow of the bioluminescent vines that hung from the ceiling, casting an ethereal light over the scene. Her piercing, multifaceted eyes locked onto the figure standing before her, a young alien of her own kind, but one who had done the unthinkable. "So the rumors are true. You really bonded with the human," she said gravely, her voice resonating with a deep, melodic timbre that seemed to vibrate through the very air. The young alien, named Kael, stood tall despite the weight of the queen's gaze. His own scales, a vibrant blue compared to the queen's regal silver, flickered nervously. He clenched his fists, the webbed fingers trembling slightly, but his voice was steady when he spoke. "Yes, my queen, I have." The chamber fell silent, save for the faint hum of the energy conduits that powered the hive. The queen's attendants, a group of high-ranking advisors, exchanged uneasy glances. Bonding with a human was not just unusual, it was forbidden. Humans were considered primitive, volatile, and dangerous. They were a species that had only recently stumbled into the galactic community, and their reputation for chaos and destruction preceded them. The queen leaned forward, her long, elegant fingers steepled in front of her. "Explain yourself, Kael. How could you, a member of the royal brood, lower yourself to such a connection? Do you not understand the consequences?" Kael took a deep breath, his gills flaring slightly as he gathered his thoughts. "My queen, I understand the risks. But the human, her name is Elara. She is not like the others. She is kind, courageous, and selfless. When our ship crashed on that desolate moon, she saved my life. She could have left me to die, but she risked everything to keep me alive. She shared her rations, her warmth, and her strength. In those moments, I saw the true nature of humanity, not the chaos and destruction we fear, but the capacity for love and sacrifice." The queen's expression softened, but only slightly. "And in your gratitude, you formed a bond with her? Do you not realize how dangerous that is? The bond is sacred, Kael. It is not something to be given lightly, especially not to a species we know so little about." Kael nodded. "I know the bond is sacred. That is why I did not form it lightly. I felt her soul, my queen. I felt her pain, her joy, her fears, and her hopes. She is not what we have been taught to believe. She is extraordinary." The queen leaned back in her throne, her gaze distant as she considered his words. The bond was a rare and powerful connection, one that could only be formed between two beings who shared a deep, unbreakable trust. It was a bond that transcended species, time, and space. Once formed, it could not be undone. "And what of the human?" the queen asked after a long pause. "Does she understand what this bond means? Does she feel it as you do?" Kael's scales flickered with a soft, warm glow. "She does, my queen. She may not fully understand the intricacies of our ways, but she feels the connection as strongly as I do. She has accepted it, and she has accepted me." The queen's attendants murmured among themselves, their voices a mix of curiosity and concern. The queen raised a hand, silencing them instantly. She studied Kael for a long moment, her expression unreadable. "Very well," she said at last. "If this bond is as true as you claim, then it must be tested. Bring the human before me. Let us see if she is worthy of such a connection." Elara stood at the entrance of the grand chamber, her heart pounding in her chest. The alien architecture was unlike anything she had ever seen. Gleaming crystal spires, flowing organic shapes, and a sense of otherworldly beauty that took her breath away. But it was the sight of Kael standing before the alien queen that held her attention. She took a deep breath and stepped forward, her boots clicking softly against the smooth, iridescent floor. The queen's gaze turned to her, and Elara felt a shiver run down her spine. The alien queen was majestic and terrifying all at once, her presence commanding respect and awe. "Elara," Kael said, his voice warm and reassuring. "This is Queen Lysandra, ruler of the Vey'lari." Elara bowed her head respectfully. "It's an honor to meet you, Queen Lysandra." The queen's eyes narrowed slightly as she studied Elara. "So you are the human who is bonded with one of my own. Tell me, Elara, do you understand what this bond entails?" Elara met the queen's gaze, her own eyes steady. "I do. It's a connection that goes beyond words or actions. It's a part of me now. Kael is a part of me, just as I am a part of him." The queen's expression remained impassive, but there was a flicker of something in her eyes. Curiosity, perhaps, or even a hint of respect. "And do you believe you are worthy of such a bond?" Elara hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "I don't know if I'm worthy, but I know that I will do everything in my power to honor it. Kael saved my life just as much as I saved his. We've been through hell together, and that's forged something between us that I can't explain. But I know it's real." The queen leaned forward, her gaze piercing. "And what of your species, Elara? Humans are known for their violence, their greed, their recklessness. How can I trust that you will not bring harm to my kind?" Elara's jaw tightened, but she kept her voice calm. "I won't deny that humanity has its flaws. We've made mistakes, terrible mistakes, but we're also capable of great kindness, compassion, and love. I can't speak for all of humanity, but I can tell you that I would never do anything to hurt Kael or your people. I care about him too much for that." The queen's eyes softened slightly, and she leaned back in her throne. "Your words are sincere, Elara, but words are not enough. The bond must be tested." Before Elara could respond, the queen raised a hand, and the chamber was suddenly filled with a low, resonant hum. The air seemed to shimmer, and Elara felt a strange sensation wash over her, a pulling, tugging at her very soul. "This is the trial of the bond," the queen explained. "It will test the strength and purity of your connection. If the bond is true, you will endure. If it is not, the consequences will be severe." Elara glanced at Kael, who gave her a reassuring nod. She took a deep breath and closed her eyes, focusing on the connection she felt with him. It was like a thread, thin but unbreakable, tying them together across space and time. The hum grew louder, and the pulling sensation intensified. Elara felt as though she were being torn apart, her mind and soul stretched to their limits. Images flashed before her eyes, memories of her time with Kael, of their struggles and triumphs, of the moments they had shared. She held on to those memories, letting them anchor her. And then, just as suddenly as it had begun, the sensation stopped. Elara opened her eyes, her breath coming in ragged gasps. She looked at Kael, who was also breathing heavily, but seemed unharmed. The queen's expression was one of quiet awe. "The bond is true," she said softly. "It is strong, pure, and unbreakable. I have never seen a connection like this before." Elara felt a surge of relief, but the queen wasn't finished. "However," the queen continued, her tone grave, "this bond will not be without its challenges. There are those among my people who will not accept it. They will see it as a betrayal, a danger to our way of life. You must be prepared to face their opposition." Elara nodded, her resolve firm. "I understand, and I'm ready to face whatever comes our way." The queen studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "Very well. The bond is recognized. But know this, Elara. You are now a part of our world, and our struggles are now your own. Do not take this lightly." Elara bowed her head. "I won't, my queen." As the queen dismissed them, Kael took Elara's hand, his scales glowing with a soft, warm light. "Thank you," he said quietly. "For everything." Elara smiled, squeezing his hand. "We're in this together, Kael. No matter what." And as they left the chamber, the weight of the Queen's words hung over them. The road ahead would not be easy, but they would face it together, bound by a connection that transcended species, time, and space. In the weeks that followed, Elara and Kael faced numerous challenges. Some of the Vey'lari accepted their bond, seeing it as a sign of hope and unity. Others, however, viewed it with suspicion and hostility. There were whispers of rebellion, of factions forming to oppose the Queen's decision. But through it all, Elara and Kael stood strong. Their bond only grew stronger, a beacon of light in the midst of uncertainty. And as they worked together to bridge the gap between their species, they began to change hearts and minds. The Queen watched them closely, her initial skepticism giving way to quiet admiration. She saw in them the potential for a new era, one where the Vey'lari and humanity could coexist, not as enemies, but as allies. And so, the rumors were true. The human and the alien had bonded, and in doing so, they had begun to change the course of history.